I sneezed on a 1,000-year-old amulet. Now werewolves think I'm a goddess. Stone floor, cold. My sleep shirt. No shoes. Torches on the walls. A ceiling lost in shadow and people, tall, pale, silver-eyed, staring at me like I was the answer to a prayer they'd stopped believing in.
She's wearing strange furs. She came through the stone. The moon sent her.
She's wearing furs.
Speak.
He said. His voice was low, old.
Prove you are
Throat closed. I had nothing. No power, no plan, just a head full of dead languages and a sneeze that had ruined my life. I opened my mouth.
May the moon keep you.
The words came out in a dialect I didn't know I knew, half remembered from a ripping, a prayer on a tomb I'd translated last semester. The stone under my hand flickered, blue light, brief, then gone. The crowd inhaled. The silver-haired man's eyes narrowed. He looked at my hand, then at my face.
The altar has not glowed in 300 years, he said.
I said nothing. My hand was shaking.
I am Lucian, Alpha of the Silvermoon clan. And you are either our salvation or our end.
The goddess must be tested. Tomorrow.
Lucian didn't look at him. He was still looking at me.
Tomorrow.
He agreed. They left. The stone doors closed. I was alone. I looked at my hand. The amulet was gone. But there was a mark on my palm. Small, crescent-shaped, burning. They locked me in a stone chamber. One door, a bed that smelled like marsh. I counted the scratches on the wall. 47 tally marks. Someone had been here before me. They'd marked the days. A girl brought food. Young. Maybe 18. Brown hair. Eyes that wouldn't meet mine.
Thank you. You speak strangely. So do you.
I'm Lena. Don't eat the bread. It's old. She left. I ate the bread. I was hungry. That night, the door opened. No guards, just him. Lucian sat across from me. Not close, not far. He didn't speak for a long time.
I don't know what you are, but I've lost too many to false hope.
How many?
4.
He said it like he was listing groceries.
They came. They claimed. They failed.
What happened to them?
He looked at the wall. The tally marks.
The last one died in the cave 3 years ago.
I felt the floor drop out from under me.
Why not kill me now?
Because the altar never glowed before.
He stood.
Not once in 300 years. Until you.
He walked to the door, stopped.
If you are a fraud, you're the most convincing one I've seen.
He left. The door closed. I sat in the dark. My hand was still burning. I looked at the tally marks again. 47. Whoever had been here before me had lasted 47 days. I had been here 1. Morning. The old man, Silas they called him, came with guards.
The goddess will be tested. The clan will witness.
They took me to a courtyard. Stone circle. Dozens of people. All watching. Silas stood in the center. He held a frole.
Recite the 3rd oath of the Moonborn.
He said. I didn't know what that was. The words were ancient. Older than anything I'd studied. The sound slid off my brain like water off stone. Silence. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed. A woman.
She doesn't know.
Her smile was a blade.
The goddess doesn't know her own words.
My face burned. Then Lena, the girl from last night, stepped forward.
The oath is...
She stopped, swallowed.
It's about silence. The space between words.
She'd just saved my life. I looked at Silas.
The oath is not in the words. It's in the silence between them.
The crowd went quiet. Simus's eye trickled.
Lucian stood at the edge of the circle, watching, saying nothing.
Acceptable. For now.
Not a gift. A promise.
I requested access to the temple texts. Simus refused.
The goddess does not need to study. The goddess reveals.
Alia found me in the hall after.
A goddess who can't hold a blade. What good are you?
I don't need a blade to cut you. Her eyes flashed.
Prove it! Fight me right now!
Not today.
Coward.
She walked away, laughing. Lucian was standing at the end of the hall. He'd heard everything. He didn't say a word. That night, Lena helped me sneak into the library. Shelves of scrolls, dust, silence. I found the curse records. Old, fragile, and wrong. The translations didn't match. Key phrases were off, like someone had copied them wrong generations ago, and no one had noticed. "This isn't a curse," I whispered. "It's a broken contract." Behind a shelf, I found a hidden door. Inside, a skeleton, chains, a diary, the last goddess, a healer. She'd lasted 47 days, then she'd failed a test. They'd left her here to die. I closed the ginery. My hands were steady. "Okay." I said to the bones, "I'm not going to be you."
Who's any here?
I took the diary, the scrolls, everything. Lena was waiting at the door. Her face was white. "What did you find?"
The truth. Ken. And a reason to stay alive.
I didn't sleep. I read. The diary was a manual on what not to do. The healer had been kind. She trusted them. She died. I wouldn't make the same mistakes. In the morning, I went to Warwick, the oldest elder. He'd been watching me with something like curiosity. "I need access to the curse records."
Silas said no.
"Silas is wrong.
That's dangerous talk.
So is letting your people die because no one can read." He stared at me. Then he laughed. Quiet, dry.
You're not praying anymore.
Praying doesn't keep you alive. Knowing things does.
What do you know?
I laid out the scrolls, pointed to the mistranslations, showed him the gaps. "Your curse isn't a punishment. It's a translation error, and I know how to fix it." Warwick was quiet for a long time.
You're not what I expected.
He finally said, "I'm not here to be your goddess. I'm here to be your librarian. Trust me, I'm more dangerous that way." He gave me the keys. That night, Lucian found me in the library. 3 a.m, dust on my face. A scroll in my hand.
You're not what I expected either.
Good.
I didn't look up. Neither is your curse. He stayed, watching. I kept reading.
Silas announced the second test. The Moonstone Cave, a cavern in the eastern ridge, toxic air, collapsing tunnels.
The goddess will enter alone. If she is divine, she will survive.
Lucian objected.
The cave has killed 3 scouts this year.
Then the goddess will prove her power, or she will prove she has none.
The crowd murmured. Alia smiled. I looked at Lucian. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He didn't stop it.
Fine. I'll go. Before I left, Alia found me. The last one who went in there didn't come out. Have fun.
I walked into the dark. The air burned. My lungs screamed. The torch flickered. Then I saw the walls. Symbols. Hundreds of them. The same ones from the amulet. From the rubbing. From the library. Oh, oh, you idiots. This wasn't a death trap. It was a record room. I traced the symbols with my fingers. They told a story, a bargain, a broken promise, a curse that wasn't a curse at all. They'd just forgotten how to read their own history. I found a loose stone. Behind it, a chunk of rock with more writing. I stuffed it in my pocket. Dawn. I stumbled out of the cave, dust-covered, bleeding from a small cut on my arm. The crowd gasped. Simus's face went white. I held up the rock.
I found your missing page. Want me to read it? Or are you scared of what it says?
I washed the cave dust off. My hands were shaking. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, let myself breathe ragged for 10 seconds. Then I stopped. I stood up, walked to the mirror. You're not dying here. You're graduating. I went back to the library. That night, I found a note under my door. Lena's handwriting.
Meanwhile, Lucian was with Warwick.
She went into that cave and came out with knowledge. Not power. Knowledge.
That's not divine.
No.
It's something more useful.
Lucian didn't answer. Silas is planning something for the full moon. Don't eat the meat. I burned the note. Then I went back to the scrolls. I had 5 days. Full moon. Feast. Silas announced the communion. Meat. Blessings. Unity. I remembered Lena's note. I didn't eat. I watched. The warriors who ate first started vomiting within minutes. Their eyes went wild. Hallucinations.
The goddess has poisoned us!
The crowd panicked. I walked to the meat platter. Picked up a piece. Smelled it.
Nightstope root. It's in the seasoning.
Lies!
It causes hallucinations, muscle paralysis, death in about an hour. Someone wanted you to blame me. After you were too sick to think. Lucian stepped forward.
Search the kitchens.
They found a pouch of dried nightstripe. In Alia's quarters.
In Alia's quarters. She screamed.
I was saving it for hunting!
Hunting what? Your own people? She lunged at me.
Lucian caught her arm.
Enough!
Alia's face crumbled. The crowd stared.
For the first time, no one was looking at me. They were looking at her.
The trial was public. Alia stood in the stone circle. Her armor was gone. Her face was grey.
You planted the evidence! You've been trying to destroy me since you arrived!
I didn't argue.
Where did you get the night heme? A trader. What trader? What did he look like? What was his name? Silence. There are no nightshade imports in the trade logs for the past year. I checked. I held up the book. You picked it yourself. It grows on the East Ridge. I saw the broken stemses yesterday.
Alia's mouth opened. Closed.
You're not one of us! You don't belong here!
You're right. Quiet. Quiet. I don't. But I'm the only one who can read your history. So maybe ask yourself why your own goddess, if I were one, would bother saving people who throw her into death caves.
Alia broke. She admitted everything. The nightshade. The threats. The knife under my pillow. Lucian looked at her. His face was empty.
Strip her rank.
Alia looked at him for mercy. He looked away. She screamed.
He didn't flinch.
Silas made his final move.
She is no goddess. She is a demon.
Who has poisoned the Alpha's mind.
The blood trial will prove it.
The blood trial. Walk through sacred fire. A trench of burning coals. If she burns, she's a demon. If she doesn't, she's divine. I knew the fire was real. I'd burn. But I'd been reading. The diary. The old texts. The sacred fire was a trick. The coals were layered with a mineral. I asked for a minute to pray. That felt cold if you walked quickly. I used that minute to wet my feet with a solution I'd made from cave minerals. I'd been experimenting for weeks. I stepped onto the coast.
Burn, demon!
I walked. Slow, steady. My feet didn't burn. I reached the other side.
Your god is a translation error, Simus, and your fire is just rocks.
Simus lunged at me with a knife. Lucian caught his arm. The knife clattered to the ground.
Arrest him.
His voice was ice. Silas screamed as they dragged him away. I looked at my feet. They were fine. I looked at Lucian. He was staring at me, like he'd never seen me before. That night, Lucian came to my chamber. He didn't sit. He stood by the door. His hands were at his sides, open, like he was offering something.
I should have protected you.
You should have believed me. He flinched.
I do now.
That's not enough. I told him everything. The amulet. The sneeze. The fact that I wasn't a goddess. I was a student who got lost. I'd been using knowledge to survive. He listened. His face didn't change.
Does that mean you don't care about us?
I paused. I care about the truth, and the truth is, your curse can be fixed. Not by a miracle, by a library. I handed him a translation, the one I'd been working on for weeks. Read this. Then decide if you want a goddess or a solution. He read it. His hands shook.
I was wrong. About everything.
I know.
Can you forgive me?
I looked at him. The great wolf Alpha. Begging. I'm not angry, Lucian. I just don't need you to believe in me. I need you to trust my research. He stared at the paper.
This changes everything.
No. I turned back to my roles. It changes nothing. It just explains it. What you do next, that's the change. He left. I kept working. Alia was exiled. sent to a remote outpost at the edge of the territory. She found me in the library before she left.
You won. Happy?
I didn't look up from my scroll. This isn't a game.
You destroyed me.
I didn't do anything. You did. Her voice cracked.
I have nothing left.
I finally looked at her. I don't hate you, Alia. That would require caring. Her face went white. I just don't think about you at all. She stood there for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out. The gates closed behind her. No one watched her go. I went back to my scrolls. Weeks passed. I implemented the new protocols. Training changes. Herbal remedies. A written ritual calendar. The curse symptoms began to ease. Fewer deaths. Fewer untruckle episodes. Lucien couldn't sleep. He kept coming to the library, standing in the doorway, watching. One night, I looked up. Can I help you?
No.
Then stop lurking. It's creepy. He almost smiled.
You're here every night.
I have a lot of books to fix. He sat down across from me. Didn't say anything for a long time.
You saved us. And you're not even staying, are you?
I didn't answer. He nodded, like he'd expected it. He left. I touched the amulet in my pocket. It had been glowing lately, warm.
I could go home. I didn't tell anyone.
I stood in my chamber, the amulet in my hand. Columbia, my thesis. Coffee that didn't taste like campfire. Then I thought about Lena. She'd be alone again. No one else talked to her. I thought about the mistranslated texts, the ones I hadn't finished. I thought about Lucien, the way he'd finally learned to say thank you, without sounding like it hurt. I put the amulet in my pocket. I went to the library. Lena was there. She looked up. You're still here? I'm still here.
Does that mean?
It means I have a lot of books left to fix. She smiled. Really smiled. For the first time. That night, Lucien found me at dawn, asleep on a pile of scrolls. He put a blanket over me. I didn't wake up. He stayed.
The new system was formally adopted. Ceremony in the stone circle. No blood. No sacrifices. Just me. A stack of rules. And a clan that had finally stopped being afraid of the truth. I stood in front of them. No theatrics. No divine light. I'm not going to perform miracles. I'm going to teach you how to read. That's harder. And it works better. The clan voted. Afterward, Lucien walked me back to the library.
In our tradition.
The one who brings knowledge becomes an advisor for life. There's a bond.
A bond?
It's like a contract. Mutual, equal.
I looked at him. I'll think about it. He nodded. Didn't push, but he was smiling. Just a little. The research house was finished. Part library. Part clinic. Part classroom. I was organizing herb samples when Lucien walked in.
I've been reading your world's books. You have a concept called partnership.
We do.
Would you consider a partnership? Not because you're a goddess, because you're you.
He was nervous. The great wolf alpha. Nervous. I put down the herbs.
I have conditions.
Name them.
I keep my name. I keep my research. And you learn to make coffee that doesn't taste like dirt.
He laughed. I'd never heard him laugh before.
Deal.
I held out my hand. He shook it. Then he didn't let go.
In my world, we sign papers. Lots of papers.
We don't have paper.
Then you'll learn. He pulled me closer, not rough. Careful. I'm not your bride. I'm not your goddess.
I know.
I'm your partner. Get it right.
I will.
Outside, the moon was rising. Same moon, different world. I looked up at it.
Okay. Let's get to work.